You've been watching Alabama football, covering Alabama football for a long time. This is different, right? In a lot of ways, it's uncharted territory in the Saban era, at least for the most part. What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, no, it's uncharted. Going back to 2010 was the last time they lost an early November game. They lost the second game in November when they lost to LSU. So, yeah, I mean, any of the players, pretty much anybody in the program at this point, wasn't around for that. So it's all new for practically everyone but Saban, maybe a few other staffers. So, yeah, it's trying to find a different form of motivation without a championship to be that carrot on the string. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they show up with Saturday, because it seems like they've been distracted. They haven't always been mentally sharp for all these games when there was a championship on the line, conceivably. So I'd be curious to see what it's like with that off the table.
What did you make of Nick Saban's stock comments earlier in the week? If we go about, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I may butcher this, but basically said, "Hey guys, if you go out and take care of what you need to do individually, that's going to be good for us as a team." Almost sounded like he was kind of pleading with his guys, "Hey, don't quit on this team."
Yeah, no, it hasn't been an issue. I mean, they've only played, the 8 years of the playoff. There's only been 1 year where they didn't make it. They played in the Citrus Bowl, and there was, a few players. The only time they've ever had players not playing a bowl game because of the NFL draft coming up. So yeah, it's going to be. There's clearly a couple major names of Bryce Young and Will Anderson, obviously, who will be first-round picks next year, who will be facing that sort of situation. So yeah, it's going to be. It's all new for all these guys. So they've almost been proud of the fact that they haven't had to deal with those situations where they're trying to keep people mentally locked in after a championship goes off the table. So yeah, Saturdays are going to be very fascinating to me.
So Alabama plays Mississippi State following the loss at Tennessee, and it felt like you got a pretty focused Alabama, but they weren't it wasn't an offensive explosion that night. If you're looking into your crystal ball, Michael, and I know you're not a columnist, you're a reporter, coming off of a loss to LSU, what would you guess that this Alabama team looks like on Saturday?
It's a great question because, they were at home when they were playing against Mississippi State. It's easier to maybe focus in, dial in when you're at home. Maybe not as good of a team overall as what they'll see at Ole Miss on the road. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's hard to be surprised at this point because there's been so many surprises this season with the way they've come out that you're surprised that they weren't all the way mentally sharp for the Tennessee game, which figured to be such a huge game. There weren't the preparation. There was an issue with that they were talking about. So there's so many things where it's like it may be a completely clean slate, taking all the pressure off, because it seems like the pressure was maybe part of the issue that it was getting to some of the players. That if that pressure goes off the table, that they won't be as uptight coming into this game, that the preparation will be different. It's one of those things where you truly, and I don't even know if Saban could tell you what it feels like at this point in the week in practice, because he seemed pretty confident with the way they were practicing before for LSU. So yeah, I mean, offensively they were a mess against Mississippi State. It was kind of surprising since they had been the strong point against Tennessee, and it was the opposite against Mississippi State. So yeah, it's one of those teams where week to week you never really know what's going to come out.
Michael, I feel like we're talking about this team like they're 0-9. I mean, obviously it's 2 losses on the season, but it's so abnormal for what we've seen through the years with Alabama. But what you just said kind of blew me away, that pressure might be getting to Alabama, because it's like maybe that's the biggest thing that has been a constant and a consistent is Nick Saban's teams have been unflappable, right? They don't get too high. They don't get too low. They're always the biggest game on the opponent's schedule, regardless of what week it is in the season, and none of that seems to affect them. So why would this year be any different, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a question a lot of people are asking. That they're talking about players had a lot of anxiety coming out against Tennessee, that they didn't have the same, pregame. Saban said usually he sees them chanting coming out of the tunnel that they're doing certain things that they didn't do against Tennessee, and you could see just a different look in their eye for that game. And it's a very interesting question. Will Anderson was saying, and at LSU there were times where defense wasn't always getting the play call. It wasn't always coming in. They were getting it, but they weren't always doing what they were supposed to be doing on all the plays. It was getting kind of frazzled and a little frantic for him at the end of the game, and that's just something that you don't normally hear, at least that much honesty about dealing with that kind of pressure in that kind of moment. So, yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where internally it feels like there's going to be some shakeups with how they approach things moving forward.
What do you think those are? I mean, guessing what a coaching staff is going to look like, I know is a little bit of a fool's errand sometimes. I've heard people go, oh, there's no way the offensive and defensive coordinators are back next year. But we also know that Nick Saban has been quite loyal to Pete Golding. And I don't know if you necessarily put the blame at his feet. What do you think kind of when you look at makeup of the staff and you think about changes that might be on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, it would be speculation at this point. I don't want to get into that game as to what exactly they're going to do. So, yeah, when if there's something reportable, we'll report on it. But, it's one of those things where I'm sure everything's on the table.
Yeah, and certainly that's a place where there's been lots of turnover, but usually it's been turnover because guys were leaving for other jobs. Hey, let me ask you this. As it pertains to the matchup this weekend with Ole Miss, one of the things that Ole Miss has had trouble with has been at times stopping the run. LSU has a big day running the football. Tank Bigsby for Auburn had a big day running the football. Jahmyr Gibbs is so incredibly talented. Is this a week where Alabama maybe looks like an older version of Alabama where they really try to pound it on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, they're always trying to expose weaknesses wherever they can find them, and yeah, I mean, it's one of those teams where Alabama's been all or nothing with the running game. They were at least a week ago they led the nation in average yards per rush, but were in number 81 in stuff rate. So they're hitting big plays, but they were getting stuffed a lot at the line of scrimmage. So it's inconsistency with the blocking. A lot of the times, but when you can tell there are certain plays that I can almost tell right off the snap, I can tell it's going to be a bigger play for the running game where the line, you just come off the ball differently, clear a path. If Jahmyr Gibbs can get to that next level, he can get out past the line of scrimmage. He usually, good for 15, 20. He's had up to 70-something yard runs this season. So he's got that motor. It's not necessarily a between the tackles type back, but he's patient, and when he can find a hole, he can expose it. So it's been all or nothing at times with this running game. Hasn't always been consistent. Only 29 yards against, I think it was 29 yards against Mississippi State, 27 carries. So it was not there that night. So we'll see what they can do against an Ole Miss team that clearly has had issues with dynamic backs.
Yeah. Michael, last thing for you. I remember leaving Tuscaloosa late at night in 2015 after Ole Miss won that game over there and listening to, kind of post-game radio call-in stuff. And there were people that were doubting Nick Saban at that point. Now, I don't think it was a majority of people. What has the reaction been like among Alabama fans over the last 3 or 4 days following a second loss in the same season?
Yeah, I think there's a wide spectrum of those kinds of responses. I think there are more people who are questioning, I guess, the viability. I mean, his age is always something that's going to be discussed. He just turned 71. That's more of a thing now than what people would have said, when the dynasty was dying in 2015. So it's always going to run the spectrum. I'll try not to listen to it too much. Maybe take the pulse of what people are thinking, but it's always the extremes that are going to, always try to filter out the extremes and listen to people in the middle, the logical ones who want to discuss actual things instead of just the knee-jerk reactions.
That's probably pretty wise counsel. Michael, thanks for your time. Good catching up, and we'll talk to you down the line.